His career goes back quite a ways. You never know it looking at him, but 50 years with Neolife. It started, though, prior to that, he had a brief career at NASA. That's pretty cool, right? I'm kind of a big NASA fan. And then joined Neolife and led to many of our breakthroughs around the world. He also has served, not only is he world-renowned for his scientific research and development and our products, but he's also served as a member of the New York Academy of Sciences and on the Senior Scientific Advisory Council for the Council for Responsible Nutrition in DC. So he's sought after worldwide for his expertise and knowledge. We are so grateful to have him. So will you guys help me? Let's stand to our feet and give him a huge round of applause and welcome him to Talladega, Alabama, Wisdom Builder Spring Retreat, John Miller.
Hey, it is good to be back in the world. I've been hiding out in my computer for too long, you know. Zoom's a great thing. You know, we were talking about that the other day in the SAB meeting. We do a lot of Zoom meetings, but, you know, it's not the same. It's a tool that you use to replace the face-to-face, right? It's a substitute. They're wonderful tools. They're very powerful tools. But for us, those moments where you get the brains together and you go, and sometimes they go like that. Sometimes they go like that. Every once in a while they go like, ah, right? So those ah moments are not so prolific over Zoom. But it is really wonderful to be here. This is my first trip back out into the world, and you know, pleasure. You know, you're the family, right? So you got to go visit the family. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to move ahead pretty quickly. I'm going to talk about a couple of things today. My point is this, right? Our goal is to end the trend of chronic disease. It's to help the world become a healthier place. Most of the things that drive the disease problems are things that we can manage properly and reduce the risk of dramatically if we know what to do, if we have the knowledge and the tools, right? And so what I'm going to talk to you about today and tomorrow are some things that have to do with that. I want to get this guy off the screen, though. There we go. I want to tell you about this, okay? Right? The importance of finding your inflammatory balance. So, you know, when we talk about chronic disease, there are the chronic diseases themselves, and then there are the things that cause the chronic diseases. Then there's the feedback loop from chronic disease. For example, if you have a uncontrolled, imbalanced inflammation where you're in a pro-inflammatory state all of the time, that increases your risk of a disease like diabetes. And guess what? If you get diabetes, you get more inflammation, so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So by learning those relationships between not only the causes of these things, but the feedback loops that go on in the body, and how that keeps people going down the disease path and trying to find a way to break away from that disease path, I think a little bit of understanding is what we'd like to pass along today. Okay, I'd like to give you some insights into this idea of inflammation. So we'll talk about it. Okay, inflammation. You know what it is, evil twins of aging and disease, inflammation and oxidation. We've been talking about that for years now. Our cool little symbols have only been around maybe for 10 years or so. But if you look back at what we've been saying for a long, long time, we talk about inflammation and oxidation and how they are big problems. And inflammation is certainly a big one of those. There are some things that we should know about oxidation and inflammation and their relationships together, because you can't really solve one without the other. Okay. First of all, oxidation stress or oxidative stress is a two-way street for inflammatory stress. If you have oxidation event, you will have inflammation. That fire you see, there's an oxidation event, right? It's a spark that ignited that fuel that's using oxygen to burn. That's an oxidation event. Luckily, those sorts of things don't go on in our bodies because we would quickly burn up. But oxidation breeds inflammation, and conversely, inflammation breeds oxidative stress. So oxidative stress, inflammatory stress, oxidative stress. So when we look at the bigger drivers of chronic disease, you can't just take one side. You got to look at the whole thing in balance, right? So essentially, when we look at it in the context of diet and what do? Well, if oxidative stress equals inflammatory stress and vice versa, antioxidants and anti-inflammatories have got to work together, right? That's the other side of the equation. And that's what I want to walk you through here a little bit. The important thing to realize is that unquenched oxidative events always produce inflammation. The reason that that's important is because you know about free radicals and so on and so forth, and all of these oxidation events that go on in your body. If those events are unquenched, then there will always be inflammation. So from the idea of how we manage inflammation, it's good to look at both sides of that equation, right? Pro-oxidants, pro-inflammation. Antioxidants, anti-inflammation. So when somebody says, you know, I have an inflammatory problem, arthritis or whatever it might be, what do you have? The obvious solution, first thing I say is Salmonella Plus, right? Tell them about that story. But then I'll go on to say, but you should also consider carotenoids and flavonoids and cruciferous and vitamin C and vitamin E, because we want to make sure we manage the other side of that equation, not just the inflammation side of the equation. It's important to know. Inflammation and what causes it. I can't hardly read. Maybe if I put this way. Yep, that isn't going to work. Here, oh, nice strong fellow. Good. Okay. What is inflammation and what is its cause? Often inflammation is caused by an immune system reaction or overreaction from your immune system. There's good inflammation. Okay, that's the inflammation that occurs when your immune system sends a whole bunch of things over to create an inflammation around that cut you just got on your finger to create a sterile field and keep you from getting infected. Good inflammation, really important inflammation. There's also good inflammation that occurs as a result of the production of energy in your cells. All cellular energy production is oxidative in nature and produces some inflammation, but that's good. If we had zero inflammation, guess what our body temperature would be? Zero. Well, room temperature. We'd all be like 72 degrees. It'd be hard to animate us. So, so inflammation occurs in the body in two ways. One is acute. That's in response to an immune system challenge. The thing you see there, injuries and burns and toxins and sensitizers that get in, pathogens that get in, the infections and allergic reactions all generate some inflammation in the body. Those are generally considered acute, meaning they're happening right now. The other side of that equation is what we call chronic inflammation. This is inflammation that persists for long periods of time, days, weeks, life. They can be caused by things like bacteria, viruses, spores, molds, things like that. Toxins like smoke or industrial chemicals. You know, we talk about the impact of those things, but they breed this sort of low-grade chronic inflammation in the background. Hyperglycemia, high blood glucose. One of the problems that diabetics have is their blood glucose can't be managed, and that is both a pro-oxidant and a pro-inflammatory event that's going on inside your body. So, you know, should diabetic people take anti-inflammatories? They should amp up on omega-3s, and they should also amp up on antioxidants as well. Tell a little more about that in a bit. Excess fat cells, you know, you have fat cells on your body. Fat cells tend to exude these inflammatory compounds. They exude some inflammatory cytokines, which are markers of immunity, but they also exude other inflammatory compounds that tend to build this low-grade chronic inflammation that goes on. So when you're overweight, you should lose the weight, but while you're trying to lose the weight, you should make sure you're amplifying, maxing your anti-inflammatory protection against what those cells are constantly putting into your body, right? Constantly leaking these inflammatory compounds into your body. So, autoimmune diseases or immune response errors are basically all of the primary autoimmune diseases have an inflammatory component to them. Often if you're being sort of managed by a medical professional. They will introduce anti-inflammatories, often hormonal-based anti-inflammatories, some of the steroids, things like that. Again, that's something that if you find people in that situation, if they have an autoimmune disorder, that they need to pay real good attention to their diet. When I was out here, I think last year, I did a thing on the autoimmune diet. I don't know if you all remember that. Was it here or was it at Branson? It's here, yeah. And if you look at that data, it says what? Fruits and vegetables and antioxidants and anti-inflammatories and all of those things. Because when people have an autoimmune disorder, it doesn't mean that by boosting their immune system that the disorder is going to get worse. That's not the way that works, right? Otherwise, if their immune system got terrible, they'd all get very sick and die of not the disease, but something that they encountered in the world out there. So very complicated stuff, but those create inflammations as well. Diseases like diabetes, I talked about this, right? The fact that it's a feedback loop. People have diabetes, they can't manage their blood glucose. Blood glucose is a pro-oxidant and a pro-inflammatory comp in your body. It creates all sorts of havoc inside the vascular system in your arteries, messes with the walls, gets them inflamed. A very, very bad deal. So you want those anti-inflammatories, particularly ones that we know work in the bloodstream, like salmon oil plus and carotenoid complex, where we have clinical evidence that they reduce oxidative events and inflammatory events inside your body. Very important. Anything that ends in itis, you've probably heard me say this for years, itis, I-T-I-S, pancreatitis, right? Appendicitis, anything that ends in itis, arthritis, is an inflammation. So if somebody comes up to you and says, I have a itis, okay, right? You can say you can know that they've got an inflammatory problem going on there in their body, and you can help guide them towards dietary solutions. And we'll get into a little bit here in a moment about how you balance that diet to get back to that part. Is really the strong foundation. It's the key to everything that goes on in your body. What you feed your body has to do what it does with it, and you give it garbage, it's going to give you garbage back, right? It's that old computer law, right? Garbage in, garbage out. It just applies in this biological model as well. You feed your body garbage, it's going to give you garbage back. If you give it chicken McNuggets, it's going to give you chicken McNuggets. Itis. Anyway, I tend to try to keep these things light, because if you get really serious about this, you don't sleep well at night. Unless you're a neo-lifer. Anyway. So let's talk about the relationship between inflammation and disease risk. Okay, this is data from, I think, Harvard. It says wisdom builders because they put that in there. You can see here this little chart. I like this little chart because it talks about, remember we talked about acute inflammation, those things that are acute inflammation, allergic reactions, and how that feeds chronic inflammation, especially when you've got poor diet in there. If you think about this, if you look at the average American diet, it is sad, right, standard American diet, because it's pro-inflammatory, okay? So it boosts your inflammatory load, but at the same time, it's low on anti-inflammatory. You get one going this way, and then you get another one going that way because you don't have the one on the other side to counter it. Same on the oxidation side, right? They tend to be pro-oxidant in the absence of antioxidants. So if they're eating a pro-oxidant, pro-inflammatory diet and taking antioxidants and anti-inflammatory nutrients, that's better. It's not too smart, because you really need to take the bad things out if you can. But the real problem is that diet doesn't deal with these things. So you go from there to chronic disease. So chronic is involved in every one of those diseases you see up there. So people who have chronic inflammation who eat the standard American diet that is deficient in anti and overloaded in pro-inflammatory and oxidating compounds, cardiovascular disease, neurologic disorders, autoimmune disease, you can see them up there. I'm not going to go through them all. There's nothing up there that you want for Christmas. No. there's nothing up there that you want, period. You want to avoid that. Don't, you know, it's just not smart to do. And the connection is pretty obvious. For me, you know, I get up every day and think about relationship. Okay, I think about the relationship. Okay, I got this going on. What am I going to do to maximize my potential for not having this be a problem and minimize my risk of it being a problem? So I have a diet strategy every day. Every day, every single day, okay, I make sure I got a lot of fruit in there. I eat a lot of blueberries, okay, a lot of cranberries, and a lot of berries in general. I get blueberries in my diet every day. Not because they're just great antioxidants, but because they're particularly good at getting across the blood-brain barrier and protecting the brain from those sorts of oxidation and inflammation events that go on. So you need to develop a strategy, and I'll get a little more into the strategy here idea again. It's just something we all need to practice. Inflammation and disease risk. Can you read that up there? It says inflammatory diseases include a vast array of disorders and conditions that are characterized by inflammation. Examples are allergy, asthma, autoimmune, celiac. Did you know that celiac was a big inflammatory problem? Big inflammatory problem. So people who have celiac disease or gluten sensitivity, anti-inflammatories, antioxidants are really good sort of support items. You know about glomerulonephritis? Don't worry about it. Hepatitis, enzinitis, right? Inflammatory bowel disease, people who have IBD, again, tend to be that way because they have a pro-inflammatory bias to their diet. So they need to get into an anti-inflammatory, antioxidant bias in their diet. Obesity, we talked about fat cells generating all this stress. Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, again, that's another one with a feedback loop. Once it starts going, it tends to feed itself. Like the fire, if you take logs and you put them here, and you put match and oxygen to them, they will burn quickly. Okay. However, if you control the amount of oxygen that gets in there, control that oxidative reaction, you can make that one little log, oak log, last 12 hours all night long, right? Just by controlling that. So what you're doing is you're creating an antioxidant of it by taking the oxidizing agent away, right? So, and cancer. Cancer is another one of those things that result from inflammatory and oxidative stress, but also feed back into the system more inflammatory and oxidative stress. Okay, so if somebody who's on cancer, unlucky enough to be, we'll talk about things to avoid, but they need to think about boosting their antioxidant, anti-inflammatory nutrition. Talk about inflammaging. Inflammaging. Here's something that I don't care how you feel about everything else. If you don't want to age faster than you're supposed to, pay attention, right? Because inflammation and oxidation are big drivers of what we call inflammation. Aging is a relatively fixed idea, meaning that when you arrive, okay, you have a sort of basal metabolic pattern that says, you know, this is how I operate. This is my body, and it's going to grow, and it's going to do this, and it's got a probability that exceeds what we would normally expect, okay? Probability is that in a perfect environment, in a perfect situation, a child born today, or even a few years back, could live to be 100, 110, 120 years old easily, okay? If you think back, just 2 decades ago or so, maybe 2.5 decades ago, I think the average life expectancy was about 60, okay, something like that, and now it's well over 70 on average. And you know, I know a lot of people who are well over 70 that are in our business that are, you know, acting like they're sort of 50. And that's the difference between chronological age and biological age. When we think of aging, we get too fixated on the idea of how many times the Earth has circled the sun. Okay? Because we go, oh, that's a year. Oh, that's a year. Ah, that's a year. That really is not important. We weren't circulating the sun. What if there was no sort of marker like that? Would we worry about aging as much? We probably would, but I think we'd have an entirely different perspective, right? We would think of aging maybe based upon a functionality score, right? How functional am I? That's a reflection of biological age. got little to do with chronological age, at least as it relates to the Earth going around the sun. So the thing about biological aging, when you come in and you have a sort of a probability of aging, okay, and anything that causes inflammation and oxidation accelerates that aging process. Let's look at the next slide because I think it's pretty cool. Okay. Yeah, accelerates the aging process. So if you don't want to age faster than you should, then you should try to look at the relationship between oxidation and inflammation, how it's present in your diet, how it's present in your biochemistry, and then manage that biochemistry. The blueberry thing I was telling you about your brain, that's one of the things I do. I have more than a brain, obviously, so you know, I take a lot of things for a lot of reasons. I eat a lot of fresh fruit. I eat fresh fruit and fresh vegetables every day. They dominate my diet. Not that I don't occasionally have, you know, a steak off the barbecue, or, you know, fall into the pit over there at the Burger King or whatever. You know, it's okay. It's okay. You know why it's okay? Because I know that that plays such a little role against my big deal over here that it's not an issue. You know, it's when this becomes, the Burger King becomes the big deal and your protective measures are the little deal, that's when it becomes an issue, right? And that event accelerates not only your risk of disease, but the rate at which you age. You notice that people get disease tend to not live very long, okay? It's because that, it's a true story. I know, it's a sad but true story. And it's a plan for that, right? We are given this amazing thing, but there's this, oh, just ignore it, it'll be fine forever. You know, the idea is we're given this thing, and we're given the responsibility of this thing called a human body. And it's only when you become ignorant and irresponsible that you squander that miracle, okay? But if you care for it and love it and nurture it, it will last you a long, 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 long time, okay? That's the plan, folks. That's the plan. There's no other way to look at it. Look at this thing. Oh, they put me up there. Now, you guys can see me. I don't need to be out there, do I? That whole thing goes on, and this little symbol over on the line that represents the big inflammation and the little anti-inflammation, right? And the big oxidation and the little anti-oxidation thing. And that is the driver of age. So you ladies, okay, you know, you're going to need less makeup if you pay attention to this, because you'll have fewer wrinkles to hide. Better blood flow, pinker cheeks. And you guys, we just deal with it. So now, how do you finding your inflammatory balance? We'll talk about it nutritionally. It's plenty obvious. You guys know all this already, right? Pro-inflammatory foods, fried foods, highly processed foods, you know, things that are actually not food. They're industrial food products. They're made from things that put together in a way so you think they're food. They smell like food. They taste like food. They feel like food, but they're not food. Okay, they fill the hole and give you the calories you need. But that is such a small part of what food is supposed to do. Food is not just to satisfy your hunger. Food is to fuel your biologic need. Okay? And too much of the food industry is based on the satisfy the hunger aspect and not about fulfilling the biologic need. There's essentially nothing you can buy in a drive-thru that is going to fulfill your biologic need. It's going to, you know, I'm hungry, I need a burger. Let's get some chicken. Whatever it might be. But that's about filling a hole. That's not about taking care of your biochemistry, right? So you got to get that stuff out of there. So fried foods, high sugar foods, red meat in excess. Okay? A little bit of red meat's okay. Just know that it's pro-inflammatory. A lot of stuff going on about red meat, talking about it being pro-inflammatory. So lean red meat, you know, I don't know about pork belly and stuff like that, a lot of fat. Bacon, you know, is great stuff, but not good for you. Bacon in moderation is good. So, or like this, right? Bacon wrapped shrimp, right? Because you get the bacon and then you get the omega-3s in the shrimp to offset the damage from the bacon. That's called balanced food, right? Industrial fats, you know, the stuff that you hear about trans fat and saturated, artificially saturated, they're called hydrogenated fats. Those are bad for you. Saturated fat is bad for you too. If you cook with lard, I suggest you stop. Okay. There are better alternatives to lard. Which, you know, if you're deep into Mexican food, though, it's hard to get that flavor without that lard. So anti-inflammatory foods, again, these are just a few, but olive oil, high fiber foods, any high fiber food, because guess what? High fiber is probably going to be grains or fruits or vegetables. Okay, and those are all good for you. So high fiber foods are good for that. Tomatoes, because tomatoes, we think of tomatoes being, you know, carotenoids, antioxidants, and so on and so forth, but did you know that lycopene is an anti-inflammatory? Okay, so when it, you know, it's good for reproductive men and women's reproductive systems, that it goes down and plays an anti-inflammatory role in that tissue-specific stuff. Tree nuts, walnuts, almonds, things like that, that's something else I eat every day. Okay, just because if I don't eat those, I'm going to eat chips. Chips are over on the inflammatory side, right? So I stay away from those. Leafy vegetables like spinach and kale. Who brought up the kale thing? Okay, kale. Somebody trying to tell them that kale is good for you. Trying to sell you something. Fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, tuna. You know those. You know fatty fish. Right? Those are all very good for you. Fruits like blueberries and oranges and all, you know, the things that you, if you go through the list of ingredients and carbohydrates, flavonoids, and cruciferous, garlic and stuff like that, eat those foods too. Okay, the reason that we put out those products is because the bioactives in those foods do that. Okay, I'm getting the 5-minute signal, so I can move along. Inflammation balancing strategies, load up on anti-inflammatories and antioxidant-rich foods, cut back on inflammatory foods. We've been through that. Control blood sugar balance. Very, very, very important. Glucose balance is a really powerful tool for this. And you'll learn more about that maybe later too. Exercise regularly. Exercise is a pro-oxidant event, meaning that you rev your body up, you produce more energy, so you're producing more oxygen, or more energy from that oxygen. But in the wake of that, the benefit that your body gets far outweighs the risk unless you're out there exercising like crazy on a starvation diet. Okay. If you're exercising like crazy, that oxidative events, you need to actually boost up your anti-inflammatory, antioxidant defenses against that. Any athlete will tell you that. Any athlete who knows the biology, biochemistry of it, being a sort of a big-time athlete, knows that relationship. And it's stress is a pro-oxidant, pro-inflammatory thing, so chill. Okay? Chill. It's just a good thing to do. Here's some of the foods you should eat, some of the things you should do. What can you do? Okay. Well, I say know your biomarkers. Everybody know their biomarkers? You guys got a list of biomarkers? Well, a biomarker is keeping track of the amount of anti-inflammatory and antioxidant foods you, but the foods you consume. Okay. I have a plan, right? My plan is every day I eat a bunch, and I'll work through the nuts and generally have some sort of salmon or something like that, and occasionally I'll have beef or something like that, but mostly my diet is anti-inflammatory, and it's a really practical way for you to control your weight. Controlling your weight is good because it keeps you active, but it also eliminates some of those little fat cells that are excreting these anti-inflammatory, antioxidant compounds. Know your glucose balance. The reason why you want to know your glucose, anybody know their glucose value? What? Some of you do. Why do you not know? How can you not know? There's no idiot lights on your dashboard, folks. When that thing goes off, you're in trouble. Okay, simple to do. You can't manage problems if you don't know there's a problem. And for most people who have hyperglycemia, they don't know there's a problem, especially when you consider that right now the CDC and FDA recently agreed that there's over 100 million people with diabetes or prediabetes in the US. Okay, that is a very big glucose problem. It's not only a problem because they got the disease, but they can't manage glucose, and it is pro-inflammatory and pro-oxidant in your circulatory system, which is why they get peripheral neuropathy and peripheral vascular diseases, and they stop circulating good oxygenated nutrient-rich blood to the extremities, and guess what? Those extremities start to have trouble. They get a little cut, and boom, oh, I'm diabetic. I can't heal that cut on my foot, right? That's when people find out. Right? That's the idiot light on the dashboard, right? So you need to know these things and manage stress. Have a strategy for managing stress. Have a strategy. Don't just say, well, life is stressful. Okay. Find an unstressful moment, an unstressful practice. You know, anything that takes your mind away, do something that demands that you pay attention to this so you can forget about all of that. I play the guitar. When I play the guitar, I'm playing the guitar, right? The house could be on fire. I wouldn't care or know or whatever, right? Until somebody said, hey, the house is on fire. Things your doctor, your medical practitioner can help you with. Know your homocysteine levels. How many people know their homocysteine levels? Yay, okay. You should know your homocysteine levels. That's a marker of inflammation in your body, okay? Look at blood glucose. Again, you probably need a doctor to help you get there, unless you can go down and pay for it. You just go give somebody some blood, but they tend to think those tests are expensive. But your doctor can help you get to A1Cs if you want. Good thing to know. C-reactive protein, really complicated stuff to know. Generally, they're not going to do a C-reactive protein on you until they think you're in real serious trouble. And then they're going to look at that. That's a marker, another marker of inflammation in your body, and they're going to, if there's a big inflammatory stress, and that takes a sort of a longer look, like A1Cs, look back over a period of time, and that's a marker of status over a period of time. So, but you should know those things, right? Do that. This is really simple to do. You can get a glucometer for $15 on Amazon, right? And then just remember, you want to do it when you get up in the morning. You want to get fasting blood glucose number, because your glucose is going to do this all, well, not if you. So take that. So how can we help? Weight is a big problem, always. It's a big problem simply hard on your body because it's a generator of inflammatory.
It's like John's connection. It's okay, still recording. It's frozen.
Cholesterol levels are an indicator of health, right? What happened to the total cholesterol and the relationship between cholesterol, the HDL to LDL?
Hey, Winston, what happened? We've got Hyacinth up. You know what? I think we'll just stop the recording. I think we got a lot of great information in there tonight. I think we had a few little glitches at the end, but John Miller is just going to talk about all the products we talked about on our health talk tonight, I think.
So, and we've talked about those things along the way, and we have things in the back office, and I know that there's a lot of tools within your group there, but I'm going to tell you about a few, okay? Salmon Oil Plus. Not only is it a proven anti-inflammatory, okay, it's been published in peer-reviewed journals and proven to reduce your inflammatory index dramatically in just 8 weeks. Big. These are big changes. Very few in this category, the anti-inflammatory omega-3 fatty acids, have that kind of evidence. few. I have yet to see anybody with this kind of evidence. Clinical evidence. There's a lot of animal model evidence and a lot of speculatory evidence and a lot of looking at the one thing doing one thing, the sort of pharmaceutical approach that you see with that EPA product that they sell only because they can prescribe it. So this is really important. But remember what we did here is when we worked with Dr. Gronert at UC Berkeley, a guy who discovered resolvins, did a lot of work at Harvard with omega-3s, he showed that when people in our human clinical trial took that product, it increased their ability to produce resolvins. And guess what? Resolvins resolve inflammation. So those low-grade chronic inflammation that's going on in the background, not only are you getting the cardiovascular benefits of omega-3s, you're getting that anti-inflammatory benefit, but you're getting that chronic inflammation resolution support. And that's why nature, we got attention in nature, right? The research we did was about that. It's about resolving inflammation. Now he worked, Dr. Gronert worked for the National Eye Institute, NIH. So the lady that was running NIH, Dr. Chu, was the one that wrote the article that essentially said you should take an omega-3 fatty acid supplement every day, and used our evidence as a reference for why you should do that. Very important. Carotenoids we talked about, we think of them being antioxidants and so on, but they are anti-inflammatories. Again, we have human clinical trial evidence that this stuff gets into your blood and does amazing things. We have, since 1995, we have known that carotenoid complex reduces oxidative events occurring on cell membranes. Wow. Think about that. That's 26 years ago. And we were already talking about this stuff, okay, because we understood it, and the people we were working with at the USDA understood it as well. So it's got this anti-inflammatory component to it. Same thing that goes on with oxidative stress on the cholesterol in your bloodstream. Same sort of thing, right? It's got human clinical proof that the stuff works. So I come back to that human clinical proof because there's a lot of speculation that goes on in the marketplace, a lot of what if or maybe or a lot of picking little bits of information and stringing them together and trying to make a story to build a dragon so they can come in and slay it, okay? Human clinical evidence defeats that. Talk briefly about garlic. Did you know that garlic is an antioxidant and anti-inflammatory? Particularly good for gastric inflammation like IBD, things like that. Yeah, it is an anti-inflammatory compound. The sulfur compounds, dialol, the sulfur compounds tend to be anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. The component that we know that's in there that we talk about delivering, alliin and alanase produces allicin, the active agent in that is a cardioprotector because it's anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. Okay, so we're beginning to understand more and more about that, but garlic plays an important role. Glucose balance, another one. Not only is it going to help you balance your glucose, which we know is a pro-inflammatory and a pro-oxidizing force, but if you think about the ingredients that are in there, the cinnamon and the curcumin and things like that, those are strong polyphenolic. They're polyphenolic compounds, polyphenols related to the flavonoids, but they're strong polyphenol anti-inflammatory and antioxidant agents. Okay. Same thing with Tray. Remember when we brought Tray to market, we said this contains all of these things, and we talked about the evil twins of aging and disease and said it delivers all of these. That one specifically for the evidence that shows that those things get across the blood-brain barrier and sort of limit those inflammatory and oxidative events that lead to cognitive decline. Okay, so all of these things that we talked about, this idea of balancing your diet, understanding that there's more to this than just sort of fixing it. It's the idea that you can maximize the durability of your biochemistry, maximize the life of your life by managing your biochemistry. You know, you've been given a miracle, no owner's manual. Okay, pretty good one here though. If you come here, we have a pretty good grip on the owner's manual. But no owner's manual, but it's, you know, it's a miracle, and it's going to take you some thought and concern if you're going to get the most of this deal, because that's what we're all given. We're all given these things. They say life is what you make of it. Life is what you make of it. Your in, garbage out. So my goal here was to help give you some more information about this idea of ending a trend. You know, the trend is not getting better, folks. The trend is still going in the wrong direction. And there's a tremendous need out there. We just talked about inflammation. Most of the people in this country right now live in a pro-inflammatory state. A million diabetics and pre-diabetics. Anybody who has arthritis gets added into that. Anybody that's got itis gets added into that. Anybody that has a poor antioxidant, anti-inflammatory diet and a high pro-inflammatory, pro-oxidant diet falls into that category. So there's us and there's them, and they need our help. Thank you very much.